I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to The Dairy Age, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. On this week's show, we speak to Aidan Lawless about the current performance of the Johnstown Castle herd. He explains how he is coping with the drought. But first, I asked him about the current performance of the spring and autumn calving cows.
The autumn herd are coming into their last, really, I suppose their last 60 to 70 days of lactation now at this stage. So we'll be drying off to a good portion of those towards the end of July. So we only have a couple of months production left in them. They're still performing quite well. The autumn herd are doing about 1.7 kilos milk solid still. The milk yield has dropped back, but their bottom fat and protein is good. They're doing about 4.52 fat and 3.8 protein. So that'd be good. Milk solids percentage wise, but the volume is starting to drop back compared to the spring herd. Are still doing, they're milking well still. They're doing about 26 litres. The milk composition on those are back a little bit, 4% butter fat and around 345 protein. Protein in the spring herd has been back a little bit this spring with the way the spring has come with us with the grass quality. I suppose hasn't been what we'd like it to be in a lot of cases.
Can you think back to last year, Aidan? What was the protein at this time last year?
I think on the spring herd it would have been over 350, probably around 355. The autumn herd I think is probably pretty similar, but generally for the last couple of months of lactation with the autumn herd we'd be pushing towards near enough to 4%, probably 3.9, 3.4%. So hopefully if we get the grass quality back in, we're probably struggling a bit from moisture deficit at the moment. We might talk about that later, but if we can get good grass quality, we'd expect the protein to hit close enough to 4% on the autumn herd for the last 50 or 60 days. But the spring herd are back about 0.1 or 0.15.
Yeah,
compared to last year.
I think that's fairly common across herds. Typically what people were saying from the snow on, they were seeing a difference of 0.15 to 0.2 of a protein percentage difference. So very, very similar to other farms.
Yeah, and I suppose it's not surprising, I suppose, in terms of like we wouldn't really have been really happy with at any stage that we had the lovely grass ahead of us that we would have normally had, like, because I suppose similar to a lot of farms, we probably did a small bit of damage where the sward was a little bit thinner, and like I said, it was under stress from having too much moisture for a good while. And now we're happy enough. We've done a good bit of tidying up on, so we pre-mowed so a small bit of plots. We've taken out some surplus there about 3 weeks ago, and we have good enough quality coming back now. If we could just get some moisture to get the grass growing again, we'd be happy enough that we're sort of on top of the grass situation, that hopefully from now on the cows should motor on fairly well with if we get rain.
Talk us through the diet, Aidan. What are you feeding them at the moment?
Well, the diet is pretty straightforward. We're so far we're just on grass. They're getting about, they're probably intakes, we're only estimating they're around 18 kilos of grass, then with sort of about 1.5 kilos of concentrate. So it's straightforward enough. We should have, even going on the covers there today, we still have a cover of around 190. We'd be happy enough we're sort of coming into a drought situation really, but we'd be happy enough to let the covers run down, because we find when soil moisture deficits are around 50 or 60 at the moment, when they go to that level, you could find on some of the plots that you start losing grass. So we'd be happy enough to let the cover run down a bit lower before we go trying to supplement, because it's not a good idea to try carry grass in a drought situation really. So
talk us through the weather with you, Aidan. What sort of rain have you gotten? When was the last time you had it?
The total rainfall for May was only 33 mil of rain, and we had nearly got all of that. We got all of that in the first 10 days. So we've had no rain. We've only had 3 mil of rain really in the last 30 days now really. So we've been unlucky in some way. I suppose that it's been very localized, and we just haven't got any of the thundery downpours that might have fallen there over the last week or two. And some places, even in Wexford, some places would have got significant rainfall there last Friday and even over this weekend again. Now we haven't got that yet, and God knows we got enough of it earlier on in the year, but that's where it's really probably causing the moisture deficit. Even though water tables, we're measuring water tables here as well. Water table is quite high still. It's just that top 6 or 8 inches has gone very dry and very hard. So surprisingly, I just over the cover over the weekend there and all, we're still growing probably 45 or 50, which is, it's not that far off of our demand. We've have some of those surplus silage plots that we cut out are coming back in to drop demand down to close to around 60 kilos. So
And
we're
your
yeah.
45 or 50 kilos growth, Aidan, how does that compare to the early to middle of May?
But it'd be up and down, but we grew the mid-May there when the things picked up, when the thing dried out there from around the 10th to the 20th of May. Like we grew over, we had sort of a week or two there where we grew over 100 a day. Like we'd be targeting normally this time of the year of a normal growing season. Like we'd be sort of comfortably doing maybe 75, 80 kilos a day. That's what we'd be sort of setting our stocking rate at and taking out surplus if it went above that. But like I said, we're down to, and within the next 3 or 4 days, I can imagine we'll be down well below sort of 35, 40 kilos at best if we don't get rain. And there is some forecast for later on in the week, so maybe that might come.
And what are
Yeah.
you doing fertiliser wise? Are you continuing as normal or have you pulled it back?
We blanket spread sort of every 3 weeks here. So our last application was there around the 1st of June, and we went with about I think it was 25, 30 kilos per hectare of nitrogen. So we hadn't put it back yet. So we wouldn't be due to go again now until around the 20th of June there, 25th of June. So we'll see at that stage. Obviously, if we haven't got rain by then, we won't be putting it on until we do get rain. But hopefully at that stage we will have. So no, we so far we've continued on. We've probably spread, I think, about same as a normal year now, nitrogen wise, because even earlier on the year we were still trying to get the nitrogen out to get the grass growing. So I think we probably have about 150, 160 kilos of nitrogen per hectare spread average already. We would have first, second cut silage, a good portion of that sort of fertilizer gone on as well. Like so.
Just moving away from the grass for a few minutes, and we take a focus back on the cows. You mentioned the autumn calvers, they're coming to the end of lactation, maybe 60 or 70 days left in milk. Do you have an idea of the number of days in milk to date and what sort of production they've done to date?
Days in milk so far be about 235, or sort of our mean calving date there is around the 10th of October. So they're around 235 days in milk as a herd average. They're all obviously still milking there as well. And their production so far is about just over 6,030 kilos of milk, and milk solids would be 480 kilos of milk solids. We'd be expecting to do sort of probably close to another 90 to 100 kilos of milk solids, maybe sort of over the next couple of months. So that would bring us much in line with sort of similar enough to last year.
And say in terms of drying these cows off, they're still producing quite a high level of milk. What's your selection criteria for drying off these cows?
Well, they're all pretty much in good condition score enough, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. But our main selection criteria will be that we'll be like to give them 2 months dry before they start calving. So we are due to start the calving date would be around the 25th of September. I think obviously it's due them will calve a week before that, but with our criteria really then sort of come to sort of last week of July, we'll be picking out anything there due to calve in September or early October, or any poor production ones that have very few of them would have dropped down below 10 litres, and then anything in low body condition score, maybe below 2.5 or below it in body condition score. The ones that of that, then if there are some of them, like you were saying, that are milking very well, even 15, 16 litres, we try to crash their diet a week before we dry them off, because especially in fine weather, and so we'll pick out the group, we'll put them as a mob and milk them still twice a day, but really crash their diet. Obviously no concentrate and very little grass, just to try, and we find that works well enough just to drop their yield back down, to get them down below sort of 10 or 11 litres or so before they dry off, rather than restricting them too much afterwards. So.
And then if we turn our attention to the spring calvers, they're a high level of milk production at the moment. Can you talk us through how the breeding season has gone to date? Has it been as good as last year, or have you seen the effects of the spring?
Not so much really. Like I would have said to the groups, the biggest effect of the spring has been more financially. I think both in terms of even the autumn herd and the spring herd, that we would have had higher feed costs, both fed more silage and concentrate, and then just probably the milk composition back a little bit on the spring herd. But the cows themselves, we had enough silage to feed them and all, so they were never restricted. And actually, the breeding season, I suppose the weather has been very good to them since we started breeding, really, well, bar the first week. So the breeding has gone well. We've our submission rates probably first 3 weeks we were a bit below the 90% target, but everything is we're just 6 weeks, coming into 6 weeks now. Started breeding there on the 30th of April, so we have everything submitted at this stage, and so far, fingers crossed, doesn't seem to be that many return. Maybe there's might be about 30% of the herd maybe have been served a second time, so be happy enough so far, but it's early days. I suppose all the heifers that have been served, they were served within the first 10 days, and don't seem to be too many of them repeating either. So, and in terms of the cows, we'd be happy enough body condition score and all that they are, and they're in good nick enough still. So.
And can you quantify an average body condition score for that spring calving herd?
I think it's probably around 2.8. But again, the averages, they seem to be all very. They seem to have. I've lifted. I haven't did a body condition score there just on Friday now, and haven't put it in yet. But they seem to be all fairly consistent. There's not too many thin cows in it either, so they're all probably working still fairly hard milk wise. Like there's no over. I'd say the highest one maybe is 3.5, but there's not too many of those in it either. And so a lot of them around a sort of 3 or just below 2.75 to 3 average, and probably about 2.8.
And say, in terms of your breeding strategy, are you going to continue AI or will you put in a bull?
No, bulls will be going in this week now. We're 6 weeks AI coming up now, so we should have plenty of replacements generated. So just with the herds that we have, we have a couple of different herds running, so the bulls will go in just to pick up. Hopefully there won't be a whole lot of activity from now on anyway. So the amount of calves we get from the bulls generally is pretty low. So the bulls will be going in there this week, and then just for the last final 4 or 5 weeks now. So yeah, we'll probably 11-12 week breeding period. We'll see how it goes over the next period.
And finally, Aidan, we've spoken before about the importance of cutting silage early for ye in Johnstown Castle, particularly for your autumn calving herd. Can you talk us through cut date and I suppose of more significance, did you see a hit in yields this year?
Yeah, we did. We would have. Well, our cutting date, we cut the 23rd of May, which our target would have, asked anybody asked us even the last autumn, our target cutting date is around the 15th of May, sort of to get early silage. But so it was delayed about a week. We had the option, we could have held off maybe for another week or two, but the silage, there was some plots, some paddocks that hadn't been grazed, which would be unusual for us, but it was just with the way the spring went. There was some wet paddocks that we hadn't got a chance to get out, and we closed them up, so they needed to be cut anyway. And then the paddocks that were grazed were back. Like we would have had probably about 4.5 tons of dry matter per hectare on average, maybe on some of the fields that were grazed in the spring, which would have been, you'd prefer to see them up over 5.5, or even closer to 6 maybe, but not that concerned, because we generally find we obviously with the autumn herd we'll be making a second cut again. So there's actually very good regrowth on a lot of that silage that was cut in the 23rd of May. There's covers maybe around 1,000, provided we get rain. Hopefully that'll keep coming. Now we have the option, obviously, if we do get run tight on grass, to take some of that into the grazing area as well. But we do need the silage for next autumn, obviously, as well, or the winter. So we'll be trying to avoid that if we can. But so getting it cut early enough, we got very good growth obviously on the lighter paddocks that had some of the paddocks that weren't grazed now would have yielded probably about 6.5-7 tons of dry matter per hectare, which had been a very respectable sort of yield for the first cut at that time of the year. So there was a bit of variation.
And just to pick up then on something you mentioned in terms of the grazing ground, you did a little bit of pre-mowing. Can you explain the decision around that, and was it effective for ye?
Yeah, well, it's not something we really. It's only something that we do very dip in and out of. If we had to, the main reason for it, in normal grazing circumstances, like I mentioned there before, we're only growing maybe around 50 for the last week or two. We had some grass that was sort of cover gone a little bit heavy, and we would have either ended up having to top it off after something. Ideally, we'd be taking that out for surplus, but just with the growth rates we're getting and the forecast and not getting any rain, we just couldn't afford it. We'd end up feeding it back in the silage. So it was just a little bit better to pre-mow it. The difference between pre-mowing and topping it after is probably minimal enough, but it's just, we find in the dry weather, especially in dry weather like this, if you sort of pre-mow it in the morning, graze it in the evening, it seems to work well enough. And we didn't really see any dip in production or milk solids when we were at it anyway. So
Yeah, just clarifying, it's not a common practice for you. It's just the
no,
weather
we
and the
wouldn't.
condition of
No,
the
and
grass.
like I said, this year, unusually enough, probably there's nearly every paddock is going to have to get sort of either a blade of some sort at some stage. That we've had very few grazing paddocks. That a lot of it coming back to where our post grazing heights wouldn't have been where we'd like to have been there in the first and second round. Probably similar to a lot of farms in the country. I think this year, like there was a stubble height there, and really the only way to get rid of that is to cut it at some stage, ideally for surpluses, and that's where we did make some surplus bales on a probably maybe 15 or 20% of the grazing area earlier on in the spring, and then we have some paddocks that don't need to be anything done with, and then there's a few more of them there where just the quality wouldn't have been what you'd really like. But we're sort of on top of it, hopefully a good bit now if we can get moisture, just to get the good regrowths coming back.
Thank you, Aidan.
Okay, Emily, thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Aidan Lawless for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.